This is Sara Gideon. This is where Sara Gideon works for you as Maine Speaker of the House. This is the insulin that Gideon kept affordable for Mainers and their kids. Sara Gideon has taken on insurance companies too, protecting people with pre-existing conditions, and passed property tax relief for Maine's middle class. This is Sara Gideon. And in the Senate, she'll work for you, not the special interests.
I'm Sara Gideon, and I approve this message.
But is not running as a party candidate on the ballot. Now, there has been plenty of heat in this campaign so far. Our hope is to shed some light on a number of important issues. The first round of questions that I'll ask will be addressed to each candidate specifically. They will have 1 minute to respond. Subsequent rounds will address policy with 1 minute for the first answer, and we will be open to follow-ups and discussion. We're also going to be posing some of the questions submitted by our News Center Maine viewers and by readers and subscribers of the Portland Press Herald and the Bangor Daily News. And at the end of the hour, the candidates will each have 1 minute for a closing statement. So welcome all of you. Senator Collins, we're going to begin with you. We learned this week that President Trump knew in early February that the coronavirus is deadlier than the flu and that it is airborne, but he purposely downplayed the seriousness of that threat in public and just days later was holding one of his big rallies inside an arena in New Hampshire. Did the president fail in his responsibility to protect the health and safety of Americans?
I believe that the president should have been straightforward with the American people. The American people can take hard facts, and he had an obligation as president to be straightforward with them and to tell all that he has known. I have said since the beginning that the president's performance has been uneven and that he should follow the advice of his excellent medical advisors.
Speaker Gideon, you have talked about running the House of Representatives in a bipartisan manner, symbolized by rearranging the seats. So Democrats and Republican lawmakers were sitting together. But when you polled members on coming back to address the coronavirus and other emergency measures, most Republicans didn't even respond. Have you really built a working relationship with Republicans in Augusta, something that you could do in Washington as well?
Yeah, so thanks very much for that question. Good evening to all of you. Thanks for hosting us, and thank you, Mainers, for tuning in tonight. I think my record in Augusta speaks for itself, and bringing lawmakers together, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, is something I have worked hard to do and been successful at, even in the most challenging of times. Now, whether it was looking at health care, both protecting health care that existed under the ACA, but also expanding it, whether it's been tackling climate change, whether it's been bringing people together to combat the opioid crisis, but also to lift children out of poverty. I think my record speaks for itself, and I stand by it.
All right, thank you. Max Linn, Mainers really know very little about you. You've not held public office before. You've been a Democrat, you've been a Republican, now you're running as an independent. They do know you tried to get on the ballot 2 years ago and failed. There were some signatures that were deemed fraudulent. Should voters trust you to act with integrity if you're part of their congressional delegation?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I can assure all the viewers that we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. And you know, I'm sort of from the old school, and I was always taught by my mother and father that before I address anybody that I don't know, I always introduce myself. My name is Max Linn. I've been a certified financial planner and international businessman for over 35 years. And I think we all know in our hearts that our politics needs something different. And tonight, two of my opponents, Sarah and Susan, have raised upwards of $100 million in dark money from Washington, D.C. to try to buy your vote. That's what I'm competing against, $100 million. So I know in order for me to win your vote and win here tonight, I've got to be way outside the box. I have to be that something different. So I want to share with our moderators and our viewers, a lot of times when our moderators ask me a question, I might put that question aside because I know I have to slay these giants, and it's not going to be easy. So I'm going to have to be outside the box.
Mr. Linn, we're going to move on. We got our timing lined up now.
And that's my strategy tonight. That's my strategy. So be patient with me.
Mr. Linn, thank you. Appreciate that. Finally, Lisa Savage, you have been a frequent protester at Bath Iron Works over the years and have urged the yard to pivot away from building war, focusing on clean energy manufacturing, for example. How realistic is that, and can you assure the people that work at Bath and the many people whose businesses depend on that yard that you're going to have their backs if you're part of our delegation?
Thank you for the question, Pat. Thank you, Rachel and Mike, for being here, and thank you, candidates, and listening in. That's a very good question. I do believe that a Green New Deal could send federal funding in the direction of our existing great Bath Iron Works shipyard to build something, solutions that would mitigate climate change. We're in a climate emergency now. We see the West Coast on fire. It just happened during the pandemic. The Bath Iron Works got some money under the Defense Production Act and made those machines that they use to make the COVID-19 testing swabs. They did it very quickly with reinvestment. I also know that economist research shows that building something else like a clean energy system or a light rail system would actually create with the same billion-dollar investment. So I think it's a win for climate and a win for jobs in Maine, and I think it could certainly be done as a Green New Deal.
All right, thank you. Our next question is going to come from Rachel Ohm, who is an education and political reporter with the Portland Press-Herald.
Thank you, Pat. The coronavirus pandemic has exposed the inadequacies in our healthcare system. How would you ensure that everyone who needs healthcare has access to it and can afford it? And we'll start with Speaker Gideon.
Thank you, Rachel, for that question. You know, all of us know that even before this pandemic started, we saw Mainers making terrible choices every day about whether they were going to see a doctor or put food on the table. Nobody should have to make a choice like that, and everybody deserves access to health care they can afford. Now, I know once upon a time, Senator Collins agreed with that. In fact, in the beginning of her Senate career, she said it was one of her top priorities, and yet she was a key vote for the 2017 tax bill, which has enabled Republicans across the country to bring forward a lawsuit, even during a pandemic, that threatens to take away people's health care. Here in Maine, we had to pick up the pieces. In the legislature, we protected the core provisions of the ACA, ensuring that people with pre-existing conditions and seniors would be covered. In the Senate, this is what I'll continue to do. I think we need a public option available for people to buy Medicare if they want it, and we also need to increase how Medicare works, make it better, allow Medicare to be able to negotiate with drug companies for lower drug costs, and make sure people have the health insurance they need.
Mr. Linn?
If you go ahead and repeat the question.
Sure. How would you ensure that everyone who needs health care has access to it and can afford it?
Right, and Rachel, that's an excellent question. But as I mentioned, I've got to be way outside the box tonight. I have to be different because I'm competing against $100 million. And so I'm going to put your question aside, and I have a bombshell to announce tonight. You know, right now...
I would ask that you stick with the question.
Request denied. What I'd like to say is the eyes and ears and the voices of the people, we represent nature and the wilderness. And that brings me to the CMP corridor. How many people, up to 80,000 people...
Let me interrupt for a second, Mr. Linn. Do you have any interest in health care? That's the round
yes,
we're
I do.
talking about.
And I'm
then
going
I think
to
let's
answer
talk about that, and we can talk about other things later.
Request denied again, and I appreciate that. And these moderators are such great moderators, and I apologize because I know you're all doing your job as best as possible. But please realize, well, I haven't started my time. I'm addressing this, and you're already flashing me.
Well, that was the time allotted, and that's how it was used.
Okay, well then, let me ask for clarity. I'm competing against $100 million here, okay? They're the front runners. In order for me to be the U.S. Senate candidate, I have to be out of the box tonight.
And we need to know where you stand on the issues as well.
And I've got to be different.
All right, Mr. Linn,
And
thank you.
as the moderator, I want the question, but I don't want to be judged on my answer, because the only answer are the Maine
We're moving on to
voters
Ms.
on
Savage
November
now to talk
3rd.
about-
Max,
So
now
I'm
you're taking my time.
Yeah,
well, I
you're
request
cutting
that you
into
don't
Lisa
interrupt me
Savage's
because I'm
time.
already fighting against 100 million. I don't want to fight the moderators all night. And part of my strategy is to be outside the box.
All right, let's hear from Ms. Savage, please, on the health care question.
Certainly, thank you. As a school teacher in Central Maine for 25 years, even before the pandemic hit and we moved into a public health emergency, I saw the families around me struggling to get adequate health care. Many of the children had health care, but the adults in the family did not, and nobody had adequate dental. It is not fair. That should not be the case in the wealthiest nation in the world. I stand for Medicare for all, single-payer, universal, which should be expanded to cover everyone who's not covered now, and it should be improved to cover dental and mental health hearing that aren't covered now. I think that the majority of people in the United States agree. I know that the majority of people in Maine agree, and I do know that under ranked choice voting, it's safe for, if voters in Maine agree with me that we need Medicare for all, they can rank me first without any fear of spoiling the election, and they can show with that vote Medicare for all too.
Senator Collins.
There are three key factors when it comes to health care. First of all, we need transparency in pricing. You should know what the medical procedure is going to cost before you have it. Second, we need to ensure access. That means maintaining hospitals. The proposal that Sarah has endorsed are rural hospitals because they would be reimbursed under the Medicare or Medicaid rate. That's not enough for them to survive, and full access hospitals does not solve the problem. We need to make it more affordable. There is a huge difference between Sarah and me, but the individual mandate. She supports this, which falls 80% who pay the tax, not having that they can't afford, or $50 a year. Please that a single mom pay a tax penalty of $1,000 if she can't afford insurance.
Speaker Gideon, a quick rebuttal on that.
Thank you very much. You know, Senator Collins mentioned the individual mandate. Now, Senator Collins likes to be on both sides of the health care issue, holding up her vote against repealing it on one hand, but voting 12 times to either undermine it or repeal it in other cases, and then voting for the tax bill, which has put it in jeopardy. And to be clear, Senator Collins knew exactly what would happen when she voted for that tax bill. She signed on to an amicus brief in 2012 saying that without the individual mandate, the healthcare law is unconstitutional.
All right, the next question comes from Mike Shepard, who is the politics editor for the Bangor Daily News.
Thanks, Pat. We've been asking our readers all year what they care about most, and right now the economy is number one. The Senate can't agree on a new stimulus package. State and local budgets are busting. Families are struggling. Gabriel, a 2020 college graduate from Bangor facing an unstable job market, wanted me to ask you how you would balance public health with economic growth. The question goes to Max Linn.
Well, I'm the only certified financial planner up here. That's my wheelhouse, is financial planning. But again, for the time being, I plan to answer all these questions as I see fit. So I'm going to put your question aside because I have a lot of bombshells I want to announce tonight, and I'll just get right to it. And that is, we all know the fight we've had with CMP. I'm going to go back to that and finish it.
Can we go back to economics?
No, we can't. Because right now, next week, I'm filing a suit against CMP, and we're going to stop CMP in their tracks. And I'm going to show you what it means to stop CMP because they've hired big law firms, and now I have, and we have a lawsuit coming, Max Linn and the people of Maine versus CMP. And I can promise you, as your next U.S. Senator, CMP will be stopped, and I can promise you, with Susan or Sarah, CMP will go through and destroy our cherished wilderness, and we can't let that happen. Thank you.
All right. Lisa Savage.
Thank you, Michael, for that question. I think that our lack of single-payer universal health care is one of the biggest economic problems that people in Maine are facing, because a small business has to grapple with funding the health care of their workers. They has to grapple with funding, and many people who lose their house on their mortgage, it's because though they had the cost, that is not. And for Medicare leave that solve many problems here. And we are the only wealthy country that does not have universal single-payer health care. In fact, many non-wealthy countries have universal single-payer health care. Many of them got it after World War II. It is far past time for us to do that. And under ranked choice voting, if Maine voters agree with me, they can vote for me to show that they agree that we need Medicare for all yesterday, especially in an economic crisis.
Senator Collins.
Small businesses are the key to jobs in the state of Maine. And my family has owned and operated a small business in northern Maine for 176 years. 176 years. When the coronavirus struck, it became apparent that our small businesses were in dire trouble. I co-authored the Paycheck Protection Program to help our small businesses stay afloat and provide jobs for their employees. That has helped 28,000 small businesses, that's 3 out of 4, sustain 250,000 jobs in our state. It's also brought $2.3 billion to our state in forgivable loans as long as the majority of the money is used on paychecks. That was the whole theory behind this, and it's been enormously successful.
And Speaker Gideon.
Thank you. Gabriel, I want to start by thanking you for that question. It's an incredibly important one. It was before COVID-19, and now I think the issues are even more acute for us. I think there are a number of things that we have to focus on. We need to make sure that we are building the digital infrastructure in this state that allows businesses to grow and to scale up and allows people like you to work here. Now, I also think we need stronger job training and education programs, and we need to directly address how high the cost of higher education is to four-year and technical education. Now, there's another problem, and that is COVID. Look, we have to have public health in order to have a healthy economy. Unfortunately, we see President Trump, as Pat mentioned, lying about where we were in this state. And so I want to ask Senator Collins who she thinks should be leading this country. She has neglected to answer that question, and I'd like to give her the opportunity tonight. I think Joe Biden should be our leader to help us through with public health and rebuilding an economy.
Would you care to respond?
Well, Pat, let me say this. I don't think that the people of Maine need my advice on whom to support for president. Last week, I was on a bus tour all over the state of Maine. Not a single person asked me who should be our next president. What they did say was how grateful they were for the Paycheck Protection Program that I wrote because it preserved their job or their small business. They talked about the cost of health care. They talked about the work that I had done in transportation state of Maine. Those people care about.
Thank you, Senator. As we mentioned, we have a number of questions from voters in Maine. This comes from a Bangor Daily News subscriber in Clifton. His name is Martin, and he asks, how would you address our environmental and sustainability issues in a way that builds bridges between political views? And seems appropriate. It goes to Lisa Savage first.
Thank you for the question. Well, I do think that we need a public transportation system here in Maine to get people out of their cars. That would be a huge win for climate. We have public transportation very locally in some of the cities, but we could have a light rail system that would provide public transportation between areas in Maine, and I think that would help a lot. We also need to stop building things that drive climate change and instead turn our capacity to building things that will mitigate the effects of climate change. I stand for a Green New Deal. That is a comprehensive plan that not only includes industrial capacity, but also regenerative agriculture, which is a growth area for Maine. Our farmers are younger than most states, and it also would include consumer-owned and operated utilities such as broadband internet, water systems, and electricity. I also oppose the CMP corridor, and I think that multinational corporations outside of Maine should not be making decisions about Maine's electric grid.
Thank you. Senator Collins.
I think an issue that can bring us together is energy storage. And I've introduced a bipartisan bill in the Senate so that we can invest in projects, so we can figure out how to store wind energy when the wind isn't blowing and solar energy when the sun isn't shining. It has widespread support, and I'm hopeful we'll get it through. I've also been an extremely strong supporter of the University of Maine's consortium that is developing offshore wind. This has the potential to make Maine the chief supplier of electricity for the East Coast. And I have secured tens of millions of dollars to advance that research at the University of Maine and to give 2,000 University of Maine students paid internships. I would note that according to the Portland Press Herald, Sarah doesn't pay her interns despite raising all of this money. I do and always have.
All right. Speaker Gideon.
Thank you. To address the question.
Yes, please.
Okay, so thank you so much for the question, and it's an incredibly important one. I think it's the question of our time, because already here in Maine, we feel the effects of climate change. You know, during the course of this campaign, I have spent time with blueberry farmers in Addison. I have spent time on a lobster boat in Bremen. I have been with loggers, and what I hear over and over again is we are already feeling these effects, and they are actually impacting our industries. Now, that's why in the State House, we've taken on climate change, setting incredibly aggressive goals to reduce dirty carbon emissions and increase renewable energy generation. That's exactly the kind of thing that we need to be doing, not state by state, but on the federal level. We need to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, and I will push for that when I'm in the Senate. We also need to restructure our transportation industry, modernizing both the infrastructure and the industry itself, and the same with our energy industry and our building industry to get to net zero. Thank you.
Mr. Linn, the question from the voter is, how do you find common ground on environmental issues and sustainability issues?
Right. Well, as I mentioned before, I'm filing a suit against CMP this week. So CMP corridor will not, but also the state. I've 6 months with Severn Bellevue to put the first high-speed train from southern Maine up to northern Maine. I even meet with Heather Johnson in the governor's office. I was in Wuhan, China last December, meeting with some of the top engineering firms and top law firms to get this done. So my platform, without a doubt, is the #1 talking about sustainable energy, not only in Maine and America. And I've got the new website. It's called the Converter website at maxlinnforsenate.com, and it's converting more of Sarah's supporters and Susan's supporters than ever. And it's never been seen in American history before. It's that innovative. It's the new Converter website, maxlinnforsenate.com, never seen in American history before. And I'll end with Susan's PPP program has been bankrupting small businesses. It hasn't been good. The big corporations have been taking hundreds of millions of dollars out of it.
Your time is up, sir.
Seems to me I should be
Yes,
allowed
if
to that. This program has been enormously successful, and you
the
would
big
know that
corporations
if
have
you
been taking
talked
hundreds of
to
billions of dollars out of it.
if you talk to small businesses around our state. The average number of employees that a business with a PPP loan has is 7. So this clearly has rescued an enormous number, 28,000 small businesses in our state.
All right, another question from Rachel Ohm from the Press Herald.
The Black Lives Matter movement has drawn attention to issues of racial justice and accountability of law enforcement. Do you think America has a problem with systemic racism and police brutality? And if so, what do you propose doing about it?
Senator Collins, you'll go first on this.
Well, first let me say that the brutal killings that we've observed laid bare a legacy of racial injustice that we must address. I do want to say that the vast majority of law enforcement are honorable people who risk their lives every day for us. What can we do about it? First of all, we need to enact some police reform legislation, and I was very disappointed that Tim Scott's bill to do so was blocked in the Senate by Chuck Schumer. That is a shame. Second, we need to have more educational opportunity in order to lift families of color out of poverty. And third, we need to eliminate the health disparities in the treatment of communities of color. I held the first Senate hearing to look at the impact of COVID-19 on communities of color, and sadly enough, Maine has the worst disparity in the nation.
Speaker Gideon.
Thank you for that question. You know, when George Floyd was murdered, it was a time that Americans seemed ready to have a conversation about that legacy of bigotry and the way that it has seeped into virtually every aspect of our lives and created racial injustice no matter where we look. Now, nowhere is that more apparent, I think, than in the criminal justice system, where we see these incidences of violence, brutality, and even killing. Unfortunately, at a time when Americans were ready to have this conversation, our president instead chose to sow division and hatred, even putting tear gas out into the crowds of peaceful protesters. Now, the reality is we need immediate action. In terms of law enforcement, I think we need to do things like banning chokeholds, eliminating racial profiling, making sure that we have racial bias training. But we also need real leadership. And I think that is why people keep asking Senator Collins who she thinks should be leading this country. It's not that Mainers are looking for advice about who to vote for. It's that they want to know who their senator thinks should be leading us.
Max Linn.
Yeah, I've been involved with Black Lives Matter probably longer than any of the opponents up here, but it's been through helping African Americans get out of jail. And it's called the Innocence Project. But I'm also announcing now that I've created a website for dialogue. It's called blacklivesmatternationalservice.com. What this country is lacking is dialogue. So I've created a website specifically for that, blacklivesmatternationalservice.com. And this is a serious problem, but we don't want to defund our police. We need a strong police force. I want my police tough and mean when they have to be, but gentle and nice when they have to be. My opponents want to defund. Sarah and Susan talk about defunding and having Washington tell the police departments how they have to manage their policemen. Our police are the solid rock between our civil society and create total mayhem. We need a strong police
Mr. Linn. I'm
force.
going to go back to Speaker Gideon first and then Senator Collins. Just a quick response, please.
Thank you very much. I just want to be very clear. I do not support defunding the police. I do think we need to make sure that we make changes that ensure that people of color do not continue to be brutalized or killed.
Senator Collins.
I was endorsed this week by the National Fraternal Order of Police. I obviously do not support defunding police, but Sara Gideon has received $6 million from groups that do favor defunding the police. So I'm wondering if she's now going to refund that money.
Well, I'm going to let Lisa Savage weigh in on this question now. Thank you.
As a public school teacher, I've been defunded many times, and I still went ahead and did my job. I do think that we have a very serious racial justice problem here in the country. I think it's been in place for generations. One of the big game changers is now everyone has a video camera in their hand and they know how to share the video. We've seen police acting as judge, jury, and executioner on black bodies that were accused, never convicted, of using a counterfeit 20. Is that should that be a capital crime? I do think that we need to demilitarize the police. All this military equipment that the Pentagon has been sending to police forces in our cities has made things more dangerous, not safer. And also, I think many police would tell you they are being sent into situations where a social worker, a mental health crisis worker, a community dispute resolution person would be a much more appropriate resource to be sending into that situation. So yes, I do think that we have a problem, and we can partly address it through funding, but we can also address it through holding police officers accountable when they execute people on the street.
All right, thank you. With that, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with more of our Decision Maine 2020 U.S. Senate debate right after this.
This is Sara Gideon. This is where Sara Gideon works for you as Maine Speaker of the House. This is the insulin that Gideon kept affordable for Mainers and their kids. Sara Gideon has taken on insurance companies too, protecting people with pre-existing conditions, and passed property tax relief for Maine's middle class. This is Sara Gideon. And in the Senate, she'll work for you, not the special interests.
I'm Sara Gideon, and I approve this message.
Disclose Act, which would actually require transparency around who is giving money and who is running those dark money ads. Now, Senator Collins was actually the deciding vote against the Disclose Act, and Senator Collins has taken nearly $6 million during her time as a senator. So I think without question, if we want to get special interests out of things and make sure that we are focusing on people and getting things done, we have to have reform in this way.
Next up, Ms. Max Linn.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, which I will answer because my two opponents have raised upwards of $100 million in dark money from
It's
Washington,
about 40
DC.
million for the candidates. It
For
may
each
be
of-
100 million by the end.
Yeah,
just to
by
be
the end they may
just to be
raise
clear.
$100 million, and that's right up my line because I've created a new website never seen in American politics before. It's called the Converter website, and it's guaranteed to take the money out of politics. It really makes their $100 million inoperable. And you can see it at maxlinnforsenate.com. I've completely scrubbed my website, and I've made a brand new website never seen in American politics before. And right now, we're sampling Susan's supporters and Sarah's supporters, and it's converting at a rate of somewhere between 85 to 90%. It's a website that's never been seen in American history before, and it will
85
set
to 90% of what?
It will set of their supporters. So
Of all their supporters. You
all
have a
their
website
supporters.
that's counting all of it.
Yeah, it's bringing them to me. It's called the Converter website, never seen in American history before, and it will set the standard in American politics moving forward because Americans are tired of opponents like this raising hundreds, sometimes multiple hundreds of millions.
How many people have been to your website?
Well, no, we've already tested it with about 100 people, and somewhere between 80 to 85%.
All right.
All you have to do is go to it, and I promise you, the
Pat, am I
main,
going to get
the
my
main
fair
Yes,
amount of
voters.
indeed you are. I'm
time
going to
in
have to
this
cut you off
debate?
because
Okay, the
time is
main
up.
voters
Lisa
who really
Savage.
want to see what
Mr.
I'm
Linn?
talking about, it's at Mac.
You've made your point. Thank you. Lisa Savage, please.
Well, I actually think that getting money out of politics is fairly simple. The candidates can just do what I've done. Don't accept corporate donations. Don't accept money from corporate lobbyists, corporate PACs, the PACs that launder corporate money, so candidates can claim they're not taking it while taking it. My campaign has raised about $120,000 over the course of a year, completely from grassroots, because we don't believe that corporate government is going to solve the problems that we're facing in this country. They profit from the problems that we're facing in this country. And so it's, when people in Maine are struggling to get by and they don't have a voice in the Senate because I'm the only non-millionaire up here. People in Maine need a real working person to go and be their voice in the Senate and reflect the values and the needs of actual people that aren't multimillionaires. So I think that getting people into Congress that aren't owned by corporate interests is absolutely job one.
How do you think
Senator
I got my
Susan
$1 million
Collins.
except
Sarah
by working
Gideon.
hard?
Mr. Linn, yes. Senator Collins' turn.
Sarah Gideon has set a record in the amount of dark money that has flooded the airwaves at this state. I'm sure that all of you out there are sick of them as I am. 70% of the ads either attacking me or promoting Sarah have come from out-of-state groups, primarily dark money. I believe that there should be no dark money. There should be complete disclosure. Now, Sarah said that she supports the Disclose Act. The Disclose Act exempted powerful special interests, including the NRA and labor unions. That's not cleaning up the system. That's allowing dark money to continue for certain powerful favored groups.
Let me ask
She
if you would.
also has received corporate money directly into her leadership PAC up until just a few months before she decided to run.
All right, do you want to respond to that, Speaker Gideon?
Yes, thank you very much. I want to make clear a couple of things. The first is that when I made a decision to run for U.S. Senate, I made a decision to reject all corporate PAC money. And the reason for that is because when we look at what does not get done in Washington, whether it is around health care, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, fighting climate change, it's because the big pharmaceutical companies, the oil and gas industries, and the health insurance companies have a seat at the table. It is important to reject corporate PAC money. Senator Collins continues to take that money in this campaign. And make no mistake, those outside groups are running ads left and right for Senator Collins.
Well, seeing all those ads, and yes, everyone agrees they're just wallpaper at this point. I guess the question is, we've had a lot of voters ask us, and if you could give us a quick yes or no answer, would you support a constitutional amendment to change the rules to regulate that kind of money, which Citizens United clearly allows to happen? Senator Collins, would you?
Overturning Citizens United would not do anything to ban dark money.
So no constitutional amendment?
Take years. The better thing is to pass legislation that requires all donors to be disclosed, all of them. That's the way that you end dark money.
Constitutional amendment?
Yes, I absolutely support a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United.
Mr. Linn?
Well, it seems like a comic show with these two, Sarah and Susan. They're raising upwards of $100 million by the end of the campaign in dark money.
So would you support an amendment that would try to regulate that?
Well, number one, yes, we have to. And number two, that's what my website's about, maxlinnforsenate.com. It's the converter website never seen in American history before.
And Ms. Savage, let me ask you, would you support such an amendment?
I would. Corporations are not people, and money is not political speech as protected under the First Amendment, in my view.
I've got a question now from Rich, who's in Saco. He's a Press Herald subscriber. He says Social Security and Medicare will be underfunded in 10 years or less. What specific proposals would you sponsor to ensure the integrity of those programs? Would that include increased taxation or reduction in benefits? Max Linn.
And for clarity, I thought you were going to, Sarah, repeat that for me again.
Yeah, the question is, what proposals would you sponsor to ensure the integrity of Social Security and Medicare? Would it include increased taxes or reduced benefits?
Well, that's what I say on our converter website. We address just that issue. I'm the only financial expert up here. After 35 years as a financial planner, I probably have more financial experience of what's going on with our elderly and the abuses in Washington right now than all three opponents combined. And I can assure you that, number one, we as Americans have to put a priority on our retirees. That's the world I worked in, is helping retirees in their financial planning. Nothing's more important than that. So we don't need to raise taxes at all. What we need to do is we need to get people who aren't represented by these big corporate interests like Sarah and Susan, who can go in and make legislation really in the interest of the people, but they can't serve two masters. They're almost listening to two people talk about reform in politics. They're the essential of the establishment. When they get in office, the power either all goes to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer or the Republican leadership, Mitch McConnell. These two are actually the faceplates of the Republican and Democratic Party. The power does not stay in Maine.
Thank you, Mr.
As an
Linn.
independent, the power will stay right here with Maine.
Thank you. Lisa Savage.
Well, both Medicare and Social Security are currently funded by payroll taxes. Payroll taxes that used to be higher earlier in my lifetime. Right now, I think the best way to make those programs last for the people that need them, they're very popular, deeply popular programs in the U.S., would be to have full employment. Because it's the people who are employed in good full-wage jobs with benefits that pay into those pension programs, and their employers match those funds. So I think really it's an unemployment problem that I see, and I think that any plan to cut those programs or reduce benefits, or we heard from the current occupant of the White House that he wanted to suspend payroll taxes, but it wasn't doing away with them. It was just not having to pay them for a quarter, and then they would all come due at the end. I think those are all ideas that are really striking at some, people. I used to work with an ed tech who said, if it weren't for Social Security, my dad died when I was young. My mother would not have been able to bring us up. And those kind of stories abound. Social Security isn't just for retirees. It's a very important program that people depend on.
Senator Collins.
Social Security is the most successful social program that we have ever enacted. I agree with Lisa on that. It's made the difference between poverty and a reasonable standard of living for so many people, particularly in our state. And growing the economy would help to strengthen Social Security. I chair the Senate Aging Committee. My mother is 93. I am so offended by these ads that claim that I would cut these programs. I would never do that. We can achieve savings in the Medicare program, and one way that we can do that is by passing a bill that I've co-sponsored that would reduce the cost of prescription drugs. That would save an estimated $90 billion a year in Medicare costs. We should also put more emphasis on preventing illnesses that are so costly, including diabetes, where I chair the Diabetes Caucus. So there's lots that we could do to decrease healthcare costs, and that would help to strengthen Medicare.
Speaker Gideon.
Thank you very much for that question. You know, keeping promises to our seniors is incredibly important, and making sure that our seniors can retire and live in dignity and not in poverty is absolutely essential. That's why we have to protect Social Security and Medicare. Now, in the State House, we've worked hard to protect our seniors, making sure that we restored drugs for the elderly programming, and also making sure that we raise the reimbursement rate for people who are taking care of seniors. But unfortunately, when that 2017 tax bill passed, Senator Collins was a key vote for that. It was a nearly $2 trillion tax cut for corporations and the wealthiest families in America. In fact, 91 corporations in America now pay $0 in taxes. And we have heard President Trump say over and over again that now cuts need to be made to Social Security. Whether it was intentional or not, that's where we are right now. In the Senate, here's what I'll do. Number one, raise the earnings cap so that we can make Social Security solvent again. None of the windfall elimination provision, which hurts especially teachers in the state of Maine.
All right, another question now from Rachel Ohm from the Portland Press Herald.
Yep. President Trump has appointed, with approval from the Senate, a record number of federal judges. Reproductive rights groups have voiced concern that some of these appointees, such as Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, will make decisions that undermine access to health care and legal abortion. Do you share this concern, and do you think changes are needed to the judicial confirmation process?
I'll start with Lisa Savage.
Okay,
please.
Lisa, yeah.
Thank you for that question. It does seem that judicial appointments have become much more politicized in recent years. I don't actually favor a litmus test for judicial appointments. I would look not only at the record of a judge in terms of the rulings that they had made, but also at issues of character. Part of the design of our system of government was that the judiciary would be a check on the executive and the legislative branches, and would be able to exercise independent thought and not hew to the literal meaning of the Constitution as written, but take into account the fact that society has changed, technology has evolved, and things may be different. I also feel that sticking too closely to precedent is not necessarily a great thing. Things change. Sometimes past decisions that were made judicially were not good decisions. They were racist. They reflected white supremacy, and they need to be overturned. So those are my views on how I would look at judicial appointments.
Thank you, Ms. Savage. Senator Collins.
I agree with Lisa that the judicial appointment process has become far too political. A perfect example of that is members of the Senate in opposition to President Trump's nominees before the nominees' names were known. That is not what senators are supposed to do. I have applied exactly the same standards to all the judicial appointments that I've been called to vote upon. In the Supreme Court, I supported two of President Obama's, his two appointees, because they were qualified, they were experienced, they had integrity. They would adhere to the rule of law and to the Constitution. I applied that exact same standard to President Bush's appointees and to President Trump's appointees. And as a result, I've been, as even the newspapers have said, remarkably consistent in the approach that I have taken.
Speaker Gideon.
Thank you. This is an incredibly important subject because who is in the judiciary will have an impact on us for generations to come, especially when we think about those lifetime appointments. Now, the reality is, as has already been said by others up here, that the judiciary is a separate but equal branch of government, and an independent functioning judiciary is so, so important. Unfortunately, what we have seen over the past 4 years is a concerted effort to change the face of the judiciary. And we have seen nominees come from this president that are unqualified and not fit to be judicial nominees. Yet Senator Collins has voted as of this week for 170 of them, some of them who the American Bar Association said were literally to become a judge. Now, if I were in the Senate, I would want to make sure that someone, first of all, met that low bar of being qualified. But additionally, I'd want to make sure that they have the temperament. I'd want to make sure that they have respect for precedent. That's what I'd be looking for.
Thank you. Mr. Linn?
Yeah, and a Christian here with all of us tonight. One thing I can promise all of you, and so controversy is the abortion issue, and I really want to talk to Sara Gideon supporters, that even though abortion may not be right in my family, I assure you under no condition would I ever impose any laws or regulations that would hamper a woman's right to choose. That's between her doctor and her God. The government has federal government has no business in it. And number two, I would have never voted to confirm Brett Kavanaugh. What in the world was Susan Collins thinking? She talks about being a uniter, but that was so divisive. It was a wrong move on her part. And I assure you, we need to focus on our appointments that aren't creating so much controversy. We need to bring America together, quit pulling it apart. Susan Collins continues to talk about stuff up here that just isn't true in her voting record, nor Sarah's. These women are spenders.
Mr. Linn, I'm going to have to cut you off.
Establishment,
I'm going to have to cut you off.
The country's going to be bankrupt.
You've got 10 seconds to respond.
I have been mentioned by two of
Very
my
quickly, we gotta do our
opponents, and
closing.
I would say to Sarah that she's been very critical of my support for Justice Kavanaugh. Would she have voted for Justice Roberts?
Would you?
I believe I would have to fully study and be able to answer that question.
She's ducking the question.
Believe it or not, we've come to the end of our hour. We have time for our closing statements. Each candidate will get 1 minute. We're going to go in reverse order from the way we started. So the first closing statement goes to Lisa Savage.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you for everyone for being here tonight. Well, ranked choice voting is a game changer, and of course, I am in this race running for Medicare for All, demilitarized Green New Deal. We didn't talk about our wars or the federal budget for the Pentagon very much tonight at all. If the budget were, the discretionary federal budget were a pie chart, the Pentagon gets more than half. It gets $750+ billion a year after year, whether the occupant of the White House has a D or an R after their name. And that is an artificially low figure. Really, nuclear weapons are hidden in the Energy Department. The VA is its own budget line. I fully want to fund fully fund the VA, but to really reckon the true cost of militarism in this country, no one's asked the question, how are you going to pay for these programs? That is the first place that I would look. And some of our people here have noted that some corporations pay zero taxes.
Time is up,
As a
Ms.
school
Savage.
teacher, I've been paying 28%. That is
Independent Lisa
not
Savage. We want to go now to
fair.
Max Linn.
Yeah, I find it interesting, Susan and Sarah raising upwards of $100 million. I've mentioned both their names. They never asked me a question. The independents don't have a chance in this baited system of big money that they run in. So many times they've been talking about how much they want to save and they want to get money out of politics. They're the essence of politics. And her PPP program has hurt Americans. I am the only financial expert up here. I'm for a student loan forgiveness. People direct bailout is key. Total student loan forgiveness, number one. Number two, I'm asking for a $5,000 post-pandemic relief for all Maine families. They want to bail out big business. Any bailouts are coming, it's going to be the people, and a $500 billion for small businesses. Susan and Sarah is not for small business. They're bankrupting America, and we're coming towards a third world socialist Marxist regime.
Mr. Linn, your
and it's
time is
time
up,
for
sir.
Americans to wake up and
Mr.
get
Linn,
rid
your
of
time
these
is up. Thank you.
illegal
Sara
funded
Gideon.
candidates.
Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in. You know, when I first made the decision to run for our local town office, it was because I believed that public service is the way that you can improve the lives of people around you. And that's why in the State House, I worked so hard to bring Republicans, Democrats, and independents together to fight the opioid crisis and save lives, to lift people out of poverty, to tackle the climate crisis, to lower the cost of prescription drugs, and to make sure that we were protecting and expanding health care, including reproductive health care. Now, it's not what we see in Washington, where Senator Collins does not stand up to Donald Trump. She votes with him 94% of the time, and also allows Mitch McConnell to block progress on almost any issue. In the Senate, I will be a champion for us as Mainers. I will fight for those very issues I fought for in the State House, and I will never forget where I come from or who I represent. Thank you.
Sara Gideon, thank you. And Susan Collins.
19 years ago, our nation suffered its worst terrorist attack. Nearly 3,000 people lost their lives, including hundreds of police and firefighters. I'm so proud to have the support of Maine's first responders who work so hard to care for our communities. On that terrible day, I joined senators on the Capitol steps where we sang "God Bless America" with a sense of unity, resolve, and patriotism. Today, we're confronting enormous challenges. We need to remember that we are not Republicans, Democrats, or independents first. We are Americans. I was raised in Caribou, where my parents taught me to act with integrity and work hard. Those are the values that have guided me as I've served you in the United States Senate. I have always put the people of Maine first, and I always will.
Senator Collins, thank you. That wraps up our Decision Maine 2020 U.S. Senate debate. Our thanks to the candidates, our thanks to our colleagues at the Bangor Daily News and the Portland Press Herald, and all of us here at News Center Maine. Thank you for watching. Have a good night, everyone.
This is Sara Gideon. This is where Sara Gideon works for you as Maine Speaker of the House. This is the insulin that Gideon kept affordable for Mainers and their kids. Sara Gideon has taken on insurance companies too, protecting people with pre-existing conditions, and passed property tax relief for Maine's middle class. This is Sara Gideon. And in the Senate, she'll work for you, not the special interests.
I'm Sara Gideon, and I approve this message.